All right. And action.
All right. Today, Max and I are going to talk about the Pinoy Metabolic Test. We've been running members through this metabolic test, and we're going to analyze both Matt and Coach Andy.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to start with Matt here, and we're going to look at his graph or his chart here on the left. This was what we would just call maybe like his initial test, right? So he came in and we wanted to define his zones. We defined his MAF, his maximum aerobic function, his aerobic ceiling, his ability to utilize fat as a fuel source, and just trying to see if he was a metabolically efficient person, right? And let's just quickly go over this top graph here. And you can kind of see my pointer with the green little thing, so hopefully I'll be able to do a good job and you can follow me along with this. So this top graph here is the relationship between O2 inhaled and CO2 exhaled. And the goal to be a metabolically efficient person would be to be able to have a big gap here between these two things, all right? This next one down here where my pointer is, and you can kind of see this red cursor. You can see how it is on all the graphs below, right? So this is his RQ, or his essentially this gives us insight to whether Matt is utilizing fat as a fuel source or carbohydrates as a fuel source. And anything really above 0.75, he's starting to utilize more carbohydrate than fat. So just to kind of give you some information there. And then this graph here where my cursor is with the green is his heart rate over time. So that first number, 415 there, that's time in seconds, and his heart rate follows. And then the graph here is the relationship between total calories and fat calories utilized. And kind of the same thing here. Well, I guess this is carbohydrate in relationship to fat. Okay. All right.
So let me go over what the test is that we did with both Matt and Andy. We fit them on the metabolic analyzer, the Pinoy. So we're going to call it the Pinoy.
Right now we are looking at both of Matt's tests, though. Let's leave Andy out of this for a minute, okay?
All right. So they both went through the same protocol, and this is if, anyone out there in Radioland wants a test, this is what you're going to do. We put the analyzer on you, we put you on the assault bike, and we start you out really, really slow at 35 RPMs. While you're doing the test, I'm looking at a readout on my phone, and we're trying to pull you up a beat at a time.
Right.
I want to see every single heartbeat that you produce while we eventually increase the RPMs on the assault bike.
So you're adding strain or stress slowly over time.
Right.
And we're trying not to elevate your heart rate at too quick of a rate.
That way, when we sit down back in the office, we can look at that really nice heart rate chart and see a nice even rise go straight up. That way, we can put our cursor on it like so, and that cursor is going to correlate on all these other little graphs to whatever else it's reading out. So let's look at Matt's initial test. So Matt's initial test, hopped on the assault bike. We started him out at 35 RPMs. What was his heart rate when he first started out?
So when he first started, he was about at 111 beats.
Great. So we ramped him up from there, and what happened?
Right. So he slowly built then, and he's utilizing fat, and you can see that on this graph here, that even right from the start, he's burning both carbohydrate and fat as a fuel source. Okay. So and he was able to do this where he was not burning an excessive amount of carbohydrates in relationship to fat, all the way up to this point here where you can see total calories starts to rise and fat utilization levels off, right? And at that moment, you can kind of see in relationship here, that was about at 113 beats. Okay, so that's not doing much work for Matt. That was probably around maybe 40 RPMs on the bike.
Probably about 40 based on time.
He was 190 seconds into it at that point. So
let's take that number. That right there, we have a split off. And on the bottom chart, we're starting to see that blue, that carbohydrate ramp up a little bit. Mm-hmm. What does that mean in his body when he splits off from burning only fat and starts to bring in some carbohydrate?
Yeah, he's starting to increase his workload, first of all. Mm-hmm. He's inducing a little bit more stress and strain. He's probably starting to notice that he's starting to sweat and get hot during that time. He's no longer being as efficient as he could be. He's utilizing a fuel source that he's going to have to replenish relatively soon in comparison to his fat.
So we call that split point right there the MAF.
Yeah, that is your true maximum aerobic function.
Right there. You know, he could go on if he could stay right there at 116 beats.
Yeah, which he can.
And he could go forever.
But it would be a slow pace.
Right.
This would be a very slow output for Matt now, especially.
So our idea is to make Matt's MAF a number in which he can be, for lack of a better term, competitive at. He can move at a pace that he thinks is, that he is moving along. He's doing weights. He's, doing a workout.
Yeah, we had to manipulate Matt's workout zones a little bit here based on having such a low MAF at this point. So we kind of utilized the fact that he was still, you can see on this graph here, he's still utilizing fat. So he's still burning fat as well, all the way into around 150 beats is that?
Yep.
Right, so he's still utilizing fat, but you can see there's a drastic increase in his carbohydrate. So what does that mean? Carbohydrates, you burn through that pretty quickly. Right. So this is, if he were to stay at 150 beats, he would need to eat every 15, 20 minutes to not have any fall off in his output or his workload.
Right.
Okay.
As a marathoner, he's shooting those goo never before to keep that pace up.
Correct. You got it. He would be having to eat often.
So now we've got a really low MAF score, one that is honestly pretty unrealistic to think you can come into a CrossFit gym and do the work that we're prescribing and keep your heart rate down at that point.
Correct.
Without having to stop a lot.
Yeah.
So,
it'd basically be one rep stop. So.
Right. And you only have an hour and you do want to get a workout in. So
Correct.
What we did for Matt was we looked at his entire aerobic zone. Mm-hmm. And we gave him some parameters to work in. So show us with the cursor there of kind of how we figured out the numbers that he worked.
Yeah, so we kind of looked at this in this point here where you see a drastic increase in his carbohydrate, right? And we just kind of utilized this point right here. And I think that's around 321. Yeah, so we kind of said around 140 beats. Right? So, Matt, we really want to see you do all of your work below this.
Right.
And we prescribed him to do more GOAT to help him with that. But then even in CrossFit, he just needed to go light weights, really slow his pace down, and really focus. Really focus on this. And he self-proclaimed that he was very diligent on doing that. Is that all right? Is that a word?
He did a good job.
Yeah, he did a good job. Okay. And then he also had a crossover point here, which is down in this lower right-hand corner here, where this is basically determined as somebody's anaerobic threshold. Once you reach this point, you're kind of on borrowed time. You're no longer utilizing any fat at all, and you're strictly burning carbohydrate, and you're working really, really hard.
Now,
at that moment, his heart rate was about 160 beats, maybe 161. Okay.
So for Matt, we gave him, stay as close to 140 as you can. Mm-hmm. That's the most efficient place for you to train. And I'm going to emphasize the word training here, that we had to give him some training parameters, something to work for.
Yeah, because we were trying to improve on this point right here.
So we gave him that, don't go over 140, and definitely don't go over that crossover point where you are not efficient at all.
Yeah, stay away from 160, we said.
160 is something that the way our programming has, where it is now, where it's going to be for a little while, we're not training that anyway. So there's no reason to be
Correct.
In that area.
Yeah, he's just taking away from any time he spent above 140 was just going to take away from his goal of becoming more efficient and healthier and stronger.
So we gave Matt these numbers and we sent him off to work, which he did.
Yeah,
I coach him Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon. He's a regular face.
Correct.
He did take a vacation in there, but said himself that short of one intense WOD at a a drop-in box. He did really well. When it came into a month, we said, hey, let's check in. Let's see where we're at.
Yeah, we need to this test was done just over a month ago, almost 6 weeks ago, right?
Right.
And then this test here on the right was just done the other day.
So let's talk about that. So we bring him back in, and I text him that morning and said, how do you feel? Do you want to, are you ready coming off of vacation? Do you feel like changes have happened? And he told me, yeah, I really feel like I can come in and work at 140, and I feel like it's easier. I'm moving now. Like, I may be walking the 100-meter run, but I am moving the entire time.
Yeah, because we were nervous. We were like, maybe we should hold this off. Otherwise, it might just be a wasted test because he hasn't been back from his vacation. But he was pretty adamant, like, no, I should be good. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we, get him back on the bike. We start at 35 RPMs. What did he start at?
His heart rate wise?
Yeah, is it about the same?
Yeah, it's lower. 103, in that 105 range.
Right. So he gets on the bike, he starts going.
He's already feeling a little better.
At what point now does he start to split off? Yeah. And what is his new MAF?
Yeah, so that's in that point right there where my green is now. In that same point on heart rate is like 138.
So he went from a MAF of 113?
Yeah,
116?
Yeah, in that 115 range.
To 138.
To 138. That's
in a month.
Yep. A huge change.
What happened to his aerobic zone? So now we gave him a new MAF. Immediately we're sitting in there. We're like, okay, so you need to do as much work as you can under 140. And now it almost looks like I'm telling him, actually, you need to do as much work as you can at 138.
Yes.
But that's for the MAF number. That's trying,
Correct. That's to increase his MAF.
Absolutely.
Right, to get better.
But what happened to his zone?
Yeah, so you can see here, this flat line here, this is still his ability to burn fat, and he is still utilizing fat. So he has taught his body during exercise and movement to continue to utilize fat as a fuel source. And he is doing that all the way pretty much through this entire test that you put him through, which was all the way up to 175 beats this time. I just real quick want to go from 175 beats here to what that looked like here at 175 beats. So look at this graph here in comparison to 175. Is that 175 right there?
No, a little bit more.
Okay, in that range right there.
Right at a steep decline.
Yeah, so he is no longer utilizing fat, but more importantly, all of his energy is coming basically from carbohydrates in that time. Now he's starting to utilize carbohydrates even in his second test here.
On that bottom graph, you can see the sharp uptick of the carbohydrates.
Yeah, and that was at his MAF. Right. But he's still continuing to utilize fat as a fuel source. So what does this mean, right? He's just not giving off as much heat. He's not being what we would call inefficient. And you can see that in the relationship between all of these graphs. Everything is just more calm here, right? And Matt would report that his life feels more calm and less highs and lows as well. So kind of a cool thing to see. And really Matt would say he didn't change his diet a ton. He's just a little bit more aware of not eating off his daughter's plates. And he self-reported that he doesn't have a great diet, but not a horrible diet. And what that means, we can dive more into that with Matt as we continue to make changes and see progress.
Right. But the fact is he put in a lot of work and saw a big change.
Yeah. Well, and then not only that, but he's also reporting to us that he's feeling better during his workouts. And you can see a noticeable change in him, in his perspiration, the way he hangs his head when he works out.
Right.
He just overall is expending much less energy in this second test than he was in this first. And you can see that in several.
And suddenly he's not having to stop to recover his heart rate. He's able to move the whole entire time for these workouts. So, where we are in our workouts now, we have these long efforts right now in our training. And when you have to work out for 30 to 45 minutes in a row,
without stopping
is a huge goal. And he has now been successful in that.
Right.
Now, what I want to kind of touch on before we get too far into this bottom bit, is we use in the CrossFit gym now, if you haven't had a Pinoy test, just 180 minus your age for your math.
Correct.
And you can see how Matt
and that's what Matt was training with
prior to this
first test here.
So let's find 145. That would have been his math based on math. Right there. What happens to his body when he gets up to that 145?
Yeah. So that is the very peak of his ability to still utilize fat. So he's starting to get what we would consider pretty darn close to his anaerobic threshold. He's almost there. And he's pretty stressed.
Let's be honest. Like, not many people are able to go into a workout and use that MAF number as their top.
Correct.
Usually we try to do as much as we can around MAF, but, maybe a set of 12 pull-ups jacks us up a little bit.
Right.
Well, Matt didn't have room at 145 to go up much higher.
No,
because we are really close to that crossover point.
Because we were telling him prior to his test, give yourself 10 beats so you can keep moving. Well, 10 beats, he was going over his crossover point then. He was going threshold and anaerobic, right?
Which could be why he wasn't seeing the results he was hoping to see.
He wasn't making as much adoption as he could. So yeah, that's a great point that you made, Kate. So once we gave him his new actual math to start working in zone to work at, you can see what happened. Right? His math now is increased.
Now, was it frustrating for him to work at such a lower number when we had allowed him a higher number? Yeah. Probably. And it's his personality. He's a rule follower. Like, we give him a number, he's going to work at it.
And he was awesome about it. He bought into this program. And, the other thing that we want to talk about really quick before I get too far off of this, but we also did kind of what we would call a health survey or a health study. Mm-hmm. And it's like 150 questions, and he scored a certain score. I don't really want to share too much more about that. But then we had him do this test again. So he did the test at the same day that he did the first Pinoy or the first metabolic test. And then he did it just the other day after doing this. And his score was lowered. And a lower score is better. And significantly.
And that was a good measure of health and lifestyle and mindset almost.
Yes.
Because it asks so many questions about
it asks a ton of questions, and it's very thorough and super cool to see those two things correlate.
Absolutely.
Right. It's just another parameter that we've seen that by reducing people's inflammation, and there is no doubt when you look at these two graphs that this person on the right is less inflamed than the person on the left.
Right.
Okay, you can see it when you understand how to read these graphs.
All right, so what is this you're scrolling down to on the bottom?
So this is just kind of like where you would find his aerobic threshold and his anaerobic threshold. This is I just wanted to show where his kind of like aerobic ceiling was on his first test at 155. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of a stretch because his RER is 0.87 here.
He was not burning a whole lot of fat by the time he hit 155.
No, he was fatiguing already at that point. And now here at 162 as a new aerobic ceiling, he was still at 0.78. He's still mostly utilizing fat at that point. So
Matt's test was interesting. I ran it and we played with it a little bit, and I could see as his heart rate went up 1 beat at a time. You'd watch the heart rate. In the first few tests, what I watch is the heart rate, and I look for your heart rate to go like 98, 99, 100, 99, 98, and then we move up the RPMs. Well, with Matt, I stopped watching the heart rate so much because I could see his actual RER number changing. Like maybe he went up over 0.8. And then he would come back down under 0.8 as his body adjusted to the strain. And it was like, I know what to use.
Trying to be efficient.
I'm trying to figure out what to burn for this and be efficient.
Yeah, if he would have backed off just slightly, he would have come down back to utilizing fat.
Absolutely, and that's what we found. That's how we found these zones for him to continue working on, which was big. So we sent him off. He came in the office and we had a meeting. We gave him a new math number to work at. And we gave him a new zone. And I have no doubt that he is not going to have any problem working within those zones.
Yeah, because he's already been doing it.
Even for these, 30, 45-minute WODs, he'll stay right there even if he'll just commit to it, put his ego aside, commit to going slower or lighter. And then I hope to check in with him in a month and see, some other changes have happened.
Right. The other thing that we didn't do a great job with Matt on was doing a body composition analysis here with our in-body. But we made sure we got one here
Yep.
So now the next time, over the next 6-8 weeks, when we do this test again to check in on Matt to make sure that these are all still accurate, we'll be able to see what kind of body composition changes have happened. So it'll be fun to be able to recognize these new zones, and did he utilize fat as a fuel source and start to change his body composition a little bit.
So let's look at Coach Andy next. I want to kind of point out that, yes, Matt made huge gains. He's very dedicated. I think especially the noon crowd all knows Matt. But, we all know Coach Andy. And Coach Andy's been putting in a lot of work outside of the WODs. Matt's a 3-day-a-week guy. Mm-hmm. Now, Andy, you'll see, and I'm sure everyone's seen him coming in, putting his earbuds in, and he's been rowing a lot. He does the WODs, tries very hard. We did a baseline on him as well back in July. What did we find?
I think it was July 2nd.
July 2nd.
And in full disclosure here with Andy, this was a weekend after
the chicken incident.
Yeah,
made him
a long week. Let's just call it a long weekend on the boat. Okay, so
his diet wasn't ideal, nor was his rest, which I'm sure everyone can relate to. There are times when your body is stressed and it based on your lifestyle. But what does this mean for your fitness? What does this mean when you come into the gym and your heart rate's high?
Well, you can see in this test that Andy is stressed.
Right.
He is not being efficient. He is not utilizing fat. He's basically working really hard right from the start.
This is Andy at rock bottom.
Right. So you can see here, right when he put that mask on, his heart rate's at 106, 107 beats. And he only utilizes, we would have given Andy a score of 117 that day for his math. And we would have told him that no higher than 135, 140.
Which we did. But we also said, dude, what's going on in your life? And then he was like, long weekend on the boat. I mean, that's holiday weekend kind of stuff too.
So he started training and doing all of his extra work. So he would just come in and row for a half hour at 130 beats.
Yep.
Right? But in workouts, he would allow himself to get up to 155. Right. Which, when we look at his test from today, or even, the first one, that was way too high.
Right. So let's look at that 135 that we gave him on this first one.
Okay.
And then, we gave him the zone of 135, 145, somewhere in there. What was happening in his body when he was working in those zones? Because that's still pretty low heart rate.
Yeah, this is super low for an athlete of Andy's kind of level. You can see here that on this day, he's at 135, he's no longer utilizing fat. Right. Really, it's on a sharp decline.
That's the top end of his aerobic zone.
Correct.
Where even that's iffy.
Correct. Yeah, that was being forgiving, I guess, is the best word I could think of.
Right. So we're checking in with Andy again now, and it's been a little bit longer. This was the very beginning of July.
Yeah, it's
and now
been almost 8 weeks.
We're at the end of August. Yeah. So he has put in a ton of work. He has definitely, I know he's made it very, he's been very vocal about, cleaning up his diet, trying to eat a lot better, trying to rest more.
Yes.
Now we've got this new test. Where does he start out with just from the beginning? So in the first one, his heart rate was, 105.
Yeah, so now he sits down and he's at 80.
Awesome. So he's going into it in a better place already.
Totally a better position. So now, you can see here in this split here is starting to occur, I don't know, around second 475. And you can see now that that's closer to 130. But you can see there's not a huge deviation until this point here, right? If he stays around 140, he's going to utilize a fair bit of fat throughout his workout, no matter how long.
So all his extra work that he was training, his rowing sessions, his long biking sessions, his goat sessions. I mean, he came back to goat a few times.
Yeah.
And was working between 135 and 145. Right here in this chart, you can see the benefit of actually doing that. You notice, oh, look, he pulled all those, the fat utilization right up into that moment.
Right. And, we have to keep in mind and discuss in anything like this, the body is highly, highly adaptable.
Right.
It will adapt and become really, really good at what you do the most.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Look at the top, his volume of oxygen. Look at how efficient, how happy his body is right there with oxygen, right where he trained.
You can
all those
see,
extra hours.
just like in Matt's, the difference in the chaos.
Right.
Right? And then his RQ, same kind of thing. Right? His crossover point here, where he is now, threshold is, more like 156, 157, whereas here it was 140.
Right.
145, right?
Yeah, that's huge.
That's huge. Now we're not claiming that this test on the left was Andy at his best, but this is not so much different than how many people come in here. And
the takeaway for me is like after a long weekend or a lot of stress and work, and you come into the gym and you can feel it, like you know where you're having an off day. And now you can think about Andy after fried chicken day. Like, what happens? Like, your body actually is freaking stressed. Even though he may have felt fine at 150 beats that day, though.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, he didn't. But,
right.
Say in a CrossFit WOD, he's, deadlifting and riding the assault bike and doing burpees. And he looks up and it's like, oh, wow, my heart rate's really high today. Why am I running so hot? Maybe it's because you actually are running that hot. Your body is not utilizing the right fuels, and you're putting yourself into stress. Yeah.
And you can see it. You can see it
right.
in this test compared to this one. So I do want to show kind of, I don't think we have any, we'll show Vaughn's test that we did today and just talk about a little bit.
Hey, Vaughn.
Hey,
Vaughn listens to our podcast.
Yeah, he's our third listener now, or fourth listener now. We're going to show like this is a really good athlete. But this is somebody that has been practicing traditional CrossFit for 5 years now. And we'll just compare him to Andy, who, and they basically went through the same test. Andy didn't get as ramped up because we weren't looking for a VO2 on Andy, but for Vaughn, you can see here, this is an athlete that crossed over very, very soon into threshold work at about 150 beats. And then he continued to do a whole bunch of work past that.
And I'm finding that a lot of new athletes. So Andy's a special case because he has made it up through the MAP training with us. So
Correct.
He's kind of already started to train some of this aerobic base, where
right.
Vaughn hasn't. And I've done a couple more tests with new members.
Yeah.
And they all look like this. Now,
yeah.
I cut off one new member yesterday when we were doing our day before, sometime this week when we were doing his test, because he was good to like sit in that stew and just go. And, at that point we weren't doing any good for him. So we stopped because we got what we needed. And I think
and are able to make recommendations on that.
Absolutely. And I think Vaughn probably, he towards the end was working really hard.
He was working really, really hard. Yeah.
But that's not atypical of how he's trained for 5 years. No. So this is
kind
of like what to expect if you train this way. This is
Correct.
what your test is going to look like.
So for someone like Vaughn that is focused on lifestyle changes and being healthier, he's also interested in performance as well. So we can see here for Vaughn, if we're able to change where his crossover is here, where he goes anaerobic, which is around 150 beats, right? Let's say we can teach Vaughn, like we have Matt, to hold that off into more like the 170 beats, right? You can imagine the amount of work he'll be able to do before he induces himself or, exposes himself to any real fatigue.
Absolutely.
Because right now, after this point here, that's 143 beats for somebody that is like a really good CrossFitter. This is somebody that can just demolish most 12-minute workouts.
And probably in one of those workouts where we're looking up at the screen and we see him in orange and red, probably can hold on a conversation with us.
Just about, probably.
More like, he's going to be like, go away, I want to finish my work.
Yeah,
but
he has to get into 95% of his max heart rate to no longer be able to talk.
Which is something, because for me, I think of being anaerobic versus being aerobic. Like being aerobic is, me going for a walk. Being anaerobic, not using oxygen, I probably feel pretty bad. But there are a lot of athletes that are adapted to being anaerobic and working in that anaerobic on the other side.
Yeah.
That feel well. So it's one of those, like, just because you feel good and your heart rate doesn't seem like you are dying, maybe you're not as efficient as you thought.
And I think I was talking with Vaughn, like he's kind of wrecked. You know, he works really, really hard. This is a no pain, no gain athlete that is bought into that, and which is how most of us were, and including myself. This is somebody that needs a 3 o'clock nap, runs out of energy, you know, and also keep in mind, this is a very, very fit individual.
He's
Low percent body fat, can do lots of pull-ups, lots of toes to bars, moves weight, you know, fast.
So our goal for him, give him a goal, is to take where he's at now in terms of skill and weight and, you know, every performance.
And reduce the strain.
Reverse. Yeah. So then suddenly his chart looks, you know, next time it looks like this. And he's doing all that work, but he's burning fat while doing it. Because what happens then? Once we train that system to be aerobic, then what happens if we open it up and move this crossover?
Right.
Where he is somebody that can work.
Yeah, we want to make it so Vaughn has oxygen available to 175.
Right.
A heart rate. And I think that's where he will go, and it'll be interesting to do a follow-up on this to see what happens because we sent him home. We were like, Vaughn, you want to do a whole bunch of long rows and try to train as much as you can around 105 to 110.
He's going to do
that's like nothing. Anything. That's like nothing work. And don't go above, never go above 140. Right. But try to do as much work around 130 as he could. So. And
him being an athlete that has done competitions and has had that, and I don't think he's like retired from competitions either, didn't express anything beyond acceptance of like, awesome, I'm going to do all of my work at this, you know, lower heart rate so that when I do go back to a competition in a longer term, like that I'm going to smash everybody else because I'm going to be able to do everything in non-stressful way. And
even if he can't smash everybody else, he's going to feel better.
Right.
Like,
no, I'm talking big, long-term picture with
a
lot of training. But if we can take where he's at now and make it efficient, what does that end up being?
Yeah, that just is a healthier, happier, well-rounded person.
Absolutely.
You know, it'll be fun to see what goes on.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we want to do for everyone. I mean, you don't have to want to compete. You don't have to be a coach. You don't have to. I mean, you could be like Matt. You know, you just come in to be healthy and hang out with your kids. I mean, this is invaluable to every athlete. This
is a health program, first and foremost. Vaughn's performance will be based on improvement because we are going to make him healthier as well.
Right. And he's going to get better and stop having his shoulder bother him.
Correct.
Matt's going to lose the weight that he wants to lose and start being able to move again through workouts. I mean, these are 3 completely different athletes that all had very similar tests, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the first one, the 2 of them just had a check-in.
Yeah. This is validation to what we've been preaching and discussing. That's the coolest thing about what's going on here.
Right.
So we hope to have a whole bunch more of these to share, and we will as they come in. And
reach out to us if you want to sit down and talk about it before you do it, or if you do want to do it, like, you know, let one of us know and we'll get you on there. Yeah, you can go to treetown.pike13.com to sign up for one. There's open availability on the calendar now. Yeah. The sooner the better, really, so we can start. Let's get those baselines, get those zones set. We'll go in self loops and set your zones for you, and then it's time. I mean, what time is better than now when we have these long workouts to practice working? Right, before we start increasing intensity again. So. Right. Awesome. Okay, thanks, Kate. Good talk.